Hey guys, welcome back to another Vanguard video. Today we're talking about Sofia Sakharov introducing one of the most scary Buddyfight decks into Vanguard, which is Great Fate Frozen Stars. So I'm actually going to start with some other cards in the deck first, and then we'll get to the Rideline. Now this card is crazy for back in the day being able to nullify abilities, while also not being able to be nullified itself, essentially being a floodgate. So it is a set order, and you have to pay it for pay to gauge, but there is a card that can put it directly into the set order zone, so you don't have to pay that essentially cast cost for the card. Then you have the continuous. You can only have one of these into your order zone. So there is a reason to play multiples just so you don't lose them to gauge, but I'll talk about that more in the deck building portion. And there also is the Holy Grail, which can search it as well, but pretty much you just need the one anyways. Then you have the this card's abilities cannot be nullified by abilities other than this card, so just future proofing, just as a reference to the original. Then you have the continuous in order zone during your turn. If you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Sofia in its card name, and you have one or more star units each on both your left and right front row rearguard circle, your opponent cannot intercept, and the abilities of all your opponent's non-sentinel cards on Vanguard circle, rearguard circle, and guardian circle, as well as soul, are nullified. So drop zone is still good, but I'll break down the red text and things that do work and don't work once we get to the Vanguard breakdown. But yeah, nullifying a lot of things is crazy. Of course, you're getting rid of Soul Guard. You're getting rid of any cons on Guardian Circle that would give them any extra shield. So yes, this isn't going to be active until your turn 3. But the other continuous is also crazy, which is the other ability, continuous in order zone. If you have a grade 3 greater Vanguard with Sofia in its card name and you persona road this turn, the abilities of all cards of your opponent's units cards with Sentinel are nullified. So Sanctitude is still go, and if you do have to dig into your deck, you can grab, your 50k shield OT to Garbeth. Of course, guarding with OT always feels bad, but if that's your out to live, you kind of have to go for it. You just get rid of Sentinels, and there's also a card that gets rid of no auto. So this deck is an absolute menace. This card is way more broken than I thought it would be as someone that did play Buddyfight at the time, or at least knew of the card. And the way they've adapted in Vanguard is pretty faithful, but I really did not think it would be nullifying Guardian Circle and Soul as well, which is crazy because we are getting a lot of patterns besides drop effects that do have Soul in effects. For example, we can look at Jazzy Juggler with Harry, and a lot of other skills on Vanguard Circle that get completely screwed over. A lot of people are pointing out Android, Levy Dress. There's a whole list of things that get completely screwed over by this card. But yeah, when they go first, absolutely menace. Alone just sealing intercepts going first is really annoying, but the fact that you are nullifying all abilities of cards is really strong. You also get rid of red text if they were to give additional shield, things like that. To note, it affects cards, not players. So anything that says you gain the red text is different. The fighter is gaining that ability. It's not to the Vanguard, but anything that specifies a specific card, such as the Vanguard specifically giving that ability, those are nullified. A Great Fate Frozen Stars, absolutely crazy card. Do I think this deck is going to be meta? Probably, just because you have to respect it. And going into any event, this deck can just jump scare you and be one of your worst matchups in the game. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be upset over this just as a collab, but it is one of the more unique control decks that we have gotten, especially since CBD. So I like that we are getting kind of more patterns of defensive decks, at least within collab decks, because really we don't have that in standard, in the main sets. A lot of them are very much aggressive decks that don't really have any defensive abilities besides units gaining power, like Lishkafel or something changing their, base power to 18k base. But yeah, honestly, just a really cracked set order, but we'll break it down more once we get to the Rideline. But let's talk about the other really strong star rearguard. So the next card to talk about that is going to be causing you a lot of PTSD if you're a Buddyfight player is Stellar Deity Astraeus. He is the call cost of paying 2 gauge, so very hefty to get out. But once he's there, he's pretty much staying there. So we have the continuous on rearguard circle. All your front row star rearguards cannot be retired by either player's card abilities and cannot be retired by being hit. They can be chosen by retire effects, but won't get retired. For example, if Bav was to wipe the front row. But there are some ways to get around this, such as bind, returning to hand, let's say Siana, but very niche stuff. So most things can't really deal with this. So you pretty much just get to keep your front row, which is kind of what happened in the original where it can't be attacked. Then you have the second ability, which is the continuous front row rearguard circle. For your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 greater, if you have at least 1 star unit each on both your left and right front row rearguard circle, this unit's original power becomes 15k, and this is relevant because Sofia can give it double attack. Then if you have 2 or more front row rearguards with the same name as this unit, the original shield of all your star units become plus 10k power. So there's definitely a way for you to get to Astraeus on your board, even though it is very gauge heavy. But we have Alwidol and other cards that make getting gauge pretty easy in this deck, honestly. Plus you have your charge and draw every turn card. Just being able to keep your front row every single turn is amazing. And if you do get the setup, having all your original shield of star units becoming 10k is very strong, because this deck doesn't mind prolonging the game, as it will eventually drain out a lot of resources from your opponent, and also has some very interesting scaling for every star and drop, kind of similar to Youthquake Phantom. So just a few little niche things there, but for the most part, a lot of decks won't be able to deal with this, and this also makes it very safe to commit Astraeus in the early game if you're in in a matchup where you know it can't really die, like it'll just sit there in the front row while also protecting your other star as well. And of course, having that easy power is just so good. And if you have two or more front row rears, again with the same name, two Astraeus is in your front row, then bam, you just have easy 10k shield for all your stars. And of course, Kairos also notes this is for Guardians as well, so all your 5k star units are essentially becoming 10k, which is very, very solid for the deck. So the next card to talk about is Mysterious Fortune Teller Sofia with a call cost of pay a gauge. Continuous, this card also has a disaster race, and I'm assuming this is going to be familiar for Kiyoya, so you can combine a lot of disaster units together. Then you have the auto rearguard circle. When this unit attacks or boosts, your opponent cannot activate the auto abilities of their cards until end of battle. So literally just turning off autos for no reason, not tied to any grade or any condition, which is absolutely ridiculous. As Kairos notes here, your opponent can still resolve the abilities that were on standby, such as when your unit is attacked, such as blitz orders. I think the most easy examples are going to be like Protection Twin Cast, as well as Gallatin in drop. But yeah, just turning off autos at any point in the game is extremely strong. And if your opponent's hand is really awkward with, let's say, like a bunch of zero shields, they have the Rezael syndrome, and then Sentinels, they're going to have a really hard time guarding at the turn in the early game. So just a really, really crazy card. But the really good thing about this card is the secondary auto, which is when placed on rearguard circle, if your other rearguard with the same name as this unit was not placed this turn, you either counterblast one or discard a card from your hand. And there's a lot of on-discard effects for this deck, which is very nice, making that ability so you can save your counterblast as an alternate cost. You search your deck for up to one set order, reveal it, put it into your hand. Of course, this is going to be the Great Fate Frozen Stars, and either add it to your hand or put it directly into the order zone. And if you put it directly to the order zone, you essentially save yourself 2 gauge that you would have to pay to activate it from hand. So just an amazing ability. Or the other effect is you can search your deck for up to one item card, reveal it, either add it to your hand or arm it directly to your Vanguard. So since you're arming it directly to your Vanguard, you also don't have to pay the cost either. Yeah, just a crazy card. Being able to get your bow set up is amazing for the extra attack if you really value it. I think a lot of the times this deck will kind of go for like taller columns, which I'll talk about more when we get to the deck building portion and to Vanguard. But yeah, being able to get your Great Fate Frozen Stars set up is just amazing. Also good potential for this to be Buddy instead of the grade 2 Astraeus. And yeah, being able to search your one of item or if you're how many other copies you're playing is just very strong to immediately set it up and get it armed to your Vanguard to have that ability and extra attack be set up. All right, let's quickly go over the Starbow Artemis arrow real quick, which is arms to a Vanguard. You play it with cost pay a gauge, so if you arm it to Sofia, it's basically free. Then you continue Vanguard Circle during your turn. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 greater, your star units can attack from the back row center column, and Sofia can give double attacks, so this results in 5 attacks. Really, I think this is just more relevant once your opponent is at very high damage, let's say at like 5, where you know you're getting a ton of value from the extra attack behind Vanguard. But again, I think for the most part, taller columns will be something that you'll see a lot of players will go towards just because it's very much consistent. And you get a lot more cards out of your opponent's hand that they have to basically commit to guard the Vanguard instead of giving you like a really easy 1 or 2 pass by committing 1 or 2 cards. So yeah, Starbow Artemis arrow, very simple effect, gets you another attack from behind Vanguard. Other than that, it's not really doing much else. Now we have to achieve my ambitions, Sofia Sakharov. So we have continuous on Vanguard Circle during your turn. This unit and all your front row star rear guards get plus 1k power for each star in your drop. So very similar to Youthquake Fantome. Not exactly what I was expecting, but there are a lot of star units in this deck, but I wouldn't say like 90% of your deck is. Like majority of it definitely is. But once you do ride up, you're getting some decent scaling. I wouldn't say the greatest. Like you are probably still hitting over at least one defensive with Astraeus because he's, 15k original power. So very easy to get him up to 20 when you go first to kind of hit over a defensive, but Vanguard won't be that big unless you have something boosting behind it. But again, this power is only going to your front row stars, so not really too relevant in the early game, but in the late game, it's definitely going to add up and hit some very decent numbers, especially once you Persona Ride. Then the second skill is the act on Vanguard Circle. Once per turn, you cost discard a card from your hand to draw 1. Again, there's a lot of good ditch effects such as Alwidol, so a lot of easy combos to basically get you extra resources while also cycling deeper into your deck. Then you have the last skill, which is Chosen Being, act on Vanguard Circle. Once per turn, you cost Soul Blast 1 to choose one of your star rear guards, and it gains the double attack ability, which is auto rear guard circle. Once per turn, at the end of battle, this unit attacks. If your grade 3 greater Vanguard is stand, you cost counterblast 1, stand this unit until end of turn. One of the very few ways you will really use counterblast in this deck. There's actually a lot of really easy resources for this deck, besides the CC that you get from the buddy call once per game. So you have very easy scaling to your Vanguard and your front row stars in the late game, which is very strong. A lot of really easy cycle to go deeper into your deck, to find your PGs, to find your pieces, your Persona rides, and of course, Chosen Being is just always a very consistent, easy multi-attack for this deck, and allows you to Soul Blast cards you want to get out of your soul as well during your main phase, for example. So honestly, just an amazing Vanguard, and let's just quickly run through the rad line. So as usual, I have the same slide to kind of explain things. For the Buddyfight Rideline, we actually have 6 total cards. You have your grades of 0 to 3, of course, with your flag being very special. You don't actually have the going second, draw 1. So going second is a little bit of a disadvantage for some Buddyfight decks. And you have a card you can set as your buddy that you can guarantee call on turn 3 through the Buddy Call ability, which is a once per game. Get your card onto your board from the order zone. You call it, and you also get to countercharge 1, which is very, very strong. You also have the Gauge Zone replacing your Energy Generator crest. So you actually get to deal with Gauge instead of Energy, which allows you to pay the cost at the beginning of your ride phase to charge and draw, essentially letting you go deeper into your deck while also getting you more Gauge, which is your resources for paying costs. But do note that since the Gauge Zone is a crest other than the Energy Generator, things like the Persona Shields are going to be getting 15k. So I noted that was like a little bit of a nerf to this deck when the festival stuff got revealed, but a lot of really cool things in the Buddyfight Rideline. It is a little bit overwhelming because like when you ride up on turn 1, you have a bunch of things on standby. You have like the Gauge Zone on standby, you have like the Dragon World on standby. So you have like your flag on standby, the Gauge Zone crest, as well as your grade 1 on place ability if you have that as well. That might make it feel very overwhelming at first, but the whole point is that we have the brand new Legend World flag, which lets you use cards from Legend World, which is a world we didn't have before in the first set of this collab, as well as being able to use generics as well, which is important because some of the generic triggers are very good, and there are also resend heals as well that were included in this set. All right, now the Sofia Rideline isn't anything too crazy, but it's a really interesting one nonetheless. So we have Aibo Academy Sofia Sakharov with the auto when placed by riding from Legend World. You draw 1, choose a card for your hand, and discard it. So very easy to get a lot of discard fodder going off and getting you a lot of really easy early filter, which is very, very strong, at least in Vanguard. Then if you went second, you can draw another card, and if you drew, you just won again. So you get to draw 1, ditch 1 twice going second, which is very, very nice because like I mentioned before, a lot of the Buddyfight decks don't do anything really when they go second. Most of their like really strong effects are tied to opponent being grade 3, so a lot of them won't pop off really hard until Persona Ride turn. But even with like the new stuff, as well as like let's say Katsuno World and Tsuku, that isn't like necessarily true. Those decks are still really strong going second as well. Pretty much I just wanted to include that going second, you don't actually get an additional effect, but it's really cool that this Rideline does. Next up is the grade 2 Rideline. We have Enigmatic Vice President Sofia Sakharov. So we have auto when placed by riding from the grade 1. You look at the top 7 cards of your deck. You choose up to 2 stars from among them, reveal them. You choose one of the reveal cards, add it to your hand, discard the rest of the reveal cards, and shuffle your deck. This is really strong because a lot of these stars have drop zone effects, like calling themselves out or being able to just get them back onto your board. So very, very strong ability to kind of just filter through your deck, getting you another card into your hand while also setting up your drop zone as well. So let's go a little bit more depth into what Sofia is bringing to Vanguard. So you have 4 to 5 attacks every turn. Because you get the double attack ability to a front row star, it's very easy to do 4 attacks. You get to do 4 because it's just a taller, bigger number if you do have a specific booster star, which we'll get to later behind the Vanguard. But yeah, for the most part, you can do 4 to 5 attacks. You get to nullify no intercepts as soon as you ride up because it's during your turn. If you have a grade 3, it doesn't check your opponent's grade. So just straight up, when you ride up, no intercepts. You also get to nullify abilities during your turn of cards on your opponent's non-sentinel cards for Vanguard Circle, Rearguard Circle, and Guardian Circle. So this screws over a lot of things, like really niche things as well, like Razblaz or something in the early game. So you get like a lot of really easy utility of just messing up your opponent's guarding in the early game, which is very strong, allowing you to push on turn 3 because this deck's early game isn't very good at all. Again, nullifying abilities is really strong on Vanguard Circle specifically. This can turn off defensive autos such as Android, same for like Levy Dress. For Rearguard Circle, you can turn off abilities that gain additional shield or do something else, which is very, very, very annoying. Guardian Circle, of course, is also really good. Anything that has continuous on Guardian Circle, getting any additional shield is going to be turned off, for example, like with Soul Saver, and Soul are also nullified as well. So if you have any Soul abilities that you can kind of like bind or whatever to get additional shield are not going to be able to be activated as well. And anything putting on Guardian Circle that gains rend text, such as Transfer, that gives it to cards specifically, since Transfer specifies the Vanguard, you actually are able to stop those as well. So Transfer actually completely outed by Sofia, which is kind of hilarious. And anything that would target a specific card instead of giving the ability to the fighter. So Rezal is good with the Divine skill since it gives it to you, the fighter. So you still got your Divine skill, at least against Sofia, which is pretty nice. But a lot of things are turned off during Sofia's turn. At least you get them back during your turn. So once it's your turn, you don't really have to think about that at all. But yeah, it's going to make guarding very, very annoying. So you definitely want to keep a lot of triggers. And the really annoying thing as well is that your effect triggers are going to be turned off as well, since it nullifies them on Guardian Circle and doesn't discriminate grade either. So your effect triggers, like your fronts are going to be 15k instead of 20k, which is going to make a pretty big difference, especially if Astraeus is hitting some decent numbers or your opponent flips a front. So very, very annoying ability of just nullifying straight up a bunch of abilities, a lot more crazy than I thought it would be. And the big thing again is that continuous being able to turn off sentinels, and the dual nation Sofia or dual world Sofia also turns off autos when it boosts. So on Persona Ride, you have no sentinels, no autos. You really need Sanct or OT to guard with, or something with massive shield that isn't going to be turned off by Sofia, and pretty much everything is going to be turned off against Sofia. So it's just pretty crazy. And again, Vanguards with autos get like completely screwed over, but at least you have drop effects. So the big thing again to pay attention to are drop effects that can get you additional shield, things that activate and drop that would remove itself, bind itself, whatever. The easiest options are obviously like Protection Twin Cast, but of course like Gallatin and Aichi Icon is an easy example as well. And then, of course, you know, being able to turn off Sentinels and autos are really strong, but Blitz Orders are a big way to kind of guard into this deck and be able to survive. So a lot of the really strong Blitz Orders, we have, of course, Elementaria Sanctitude. Some of the nations still kept a lot of their stronger ones, such as like Buster Barrage, for example, and like Brandgate. But yeah, for the most part, there aren't any super duper strong Blitz Orders I would say we have right now. I think the Persona Shields are the biggest ones because they're 15k shield against Buddyfight decks, which are a really big deal, especially if you can chain multiple of them. And we also have the really good going second Blitz Orders added in DZBT15. That when you go second, you can play it. It's a 15k shield, and then you also get a Blitz Order. And then you also get a Persona Shield ticket Blitz Order to play into your hand as well, which is like amazing. So yeah, Blitz Order is definitely the big thing to note as a counter to Sofia, or at least for a way to you to survive. Same with Elementary Sanctitude. And if you really have to, just add OT for that big 50k shield so you can survive another turn and hopefully kill the deck on the crackback. So we actually got the other Astraeus as well, which is Colossal Deity of Phantom Star. Crazy name, I know. We have the act and drop. If you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Sofia in its card name, you cost to pay a gauge to call this card to back row center rearguard circle, and it gets plus 5k power until end of turn. It's actually a grade 0 with 6k power, so it'll be 11k power, but it gets really big thanks to the auto, which is back row center rearguard circle. At the beginning of your battle phase, if you have one or more star units each on your left and right front row rearguard circle, you may perform draw a card, and this unit gets plus 1k power until end of turn for each star in your drop. So in the late game, this is going to be pretty big, but on the early turns, not really. And if you did at the end of turn, you put this unit on the bottom of your deck. So this is the main thing that you are going to be giving the back row ability attack with the arrow. But I think once you combine this with the basically plus 2k to your entire Vanguard column, if you have this behind Vanguard, obviously, because you get plus 1k for every star and drop with this skill, and then Sofia is giving plus 1 to itself and your front row rear guards for every star and drop. So essentially plus 2k for every star and drop adds up pretty quickly to your Vanguard column. So I think being able to swing just like 3 really big numbers, and that's not including the double attack that you give with Sofia as well. So 4 decently wide numbers. The first one is just to poke shield off your opponent's hand, and you can kind of decide how to swing from there. Because you'll notice that a lot of the Buddyfight decks don't really have good Vanguard numbers, or at least the ones that aren't very good. So even the good ones still want really good boosters, such as like you saw for Zanya, they have 13k boosters. Same with Tsuku, making all the Jackknives SDs, basically 13k boosters as well. So really, really nice to have better boosters in this deck, especially to make really good numbers for Vanguard going first or second, which really puts the pressure because they can't easily like 2-pass your Vanguard. They have to commit a lot more cards. And if they're committing PGs in the early game, then they just don't have the PGs that they know they are going to be losing on like their Persona turn anyways. So very, very interesting matchup there. It might be a thing where you don't really mind PGing in the early game, likely like Blangmire, because you know it's not going to be active till like, you know, on that turn. It's really, really weird that Sofia's like a combination, stealing Blangmire's gimmick essentially, while also doing a bunch of other things, like nullifying the things on Guardian Circle and Soul is the bigger ones. But my main point with this is that you can go taller instead of wider. So really you don't care about doing too many attacks in my opinion until they're at 5. I mean, obviously you're always going to get the double attack, so you're always going to be a 4 attack deck regardless. But the fact that this plus Vanguard is getting plus 2 for every star and drop, especially in the end game once you have a bunch of stars in the drop, are going to make this column absolutely massive. And that's also not including the plus 5k as well. So just an amazing, amazing ability. And of course, that draw 1 also means you get even more cycle into your deck. And since it's bottom decking, a lot of other cards in this deck also bottom deck as well. Your deck out for Legend World is very, very much minimized, which is a really big problem that I say over and over again for the Buddyfight decks, but it is super true if you've played any of them. So really, really nice to have a lot of bottom deck for Buddyfight decks, so they are slowing down their deck out. So next up is a card that we know is a Legend World staple, which is Valkyrie All-Knowing Alwidol, which is used definitely in Kiri's deck as well, since it's also Legend World, but this card is absolutely broken in Vanguard as well. It was also amazing in Buddyfight. On discard, you charge and draw. Here it's even better somehow. So we have the auto when discarded from hand during your turn. So of course, this is going to be for any act abilities such as Sofia or when you discard it for riding for the ride deck, which is amazing. You put this card into soul, draw 1, and you choose a card from drop and put it face down as gauge. You're gauging from drop instead of deck, so you're slowing down your deck out while also getting so many resources. Like, this card is broken. You're definitely playing forfeit. Just every time you discard for any effect or for riding up, you just get to charge, draw 1, and essentially get a free soul, which is amazing as well, because you of course want to soul blast 1 for Sofia every turn to give that double attack ability, and that's without getting to the other soul blast cost. So yeah, Alwidol is just an amazing card. I think this pretty much just solves your soul issue straight up, so you don't really need as many of Selene, which I'll talk about more once we get to the deck building portion. But yeah, Alwidol, just a broken card, very simple. Discard it anytime during your turn. You just, shove it soul, draw 1, free gauge, just amazing. And since you know what you're putting into from drop into your gauge face down, you'll be able to know what you can get back into drop. So usually it's going to be something that isn't a star, so you can keep most of your stars in drop, obviously, for the red text. But yeah, for the most part, Alwidol is just a broken card. All right, so to cover more of these star units, we have Capella Origar. So we have the auto and drop when your unit with Sofia and its card name is attacked. If you did not put your card with the same name as this card from drop to deck this turn, so hard once per turn, you can also put this card on the bottom of deck, and this unit gets plus 5k power until end of battle. If you have 1 or more star each on your left and right front rear guard circle, you get plus 10k instead of plus 5. So plus 10k shield every turn from drop is pretty good. You combine this with Tin Crest, you have a lot of shield and drop, saving yourself a bunch of hand. So definitely a card you're at least going to be playing 3 of, if not 4. This card is just amazing. Really easy to charge and draw. You do lose, I guess, a little bit of power by bottom decking, but you really prevent your deck out on top of the grade 0 Astraeus. And at the same time, you don't really care too much about the extra power from star. I think as soon as you're hitting at least 5 or 10, kind of like a number that at least makes your front row like a magic number, kind of like similar to Yakuza, you're satisfied enough. So yeah, just amazing. More drop shield effect is of course very solid for the deck. The other star unit is Moon Celestial Selene. So with the auto when discarded from hand during your turn, you may soul charge 1. Really big that it's Yume, so you don't deck out faster. It's not a mandatory soul charge. Very good effect there. But yeah, even more ditch effect on top of Alwidol and all your other things. Of course, you don't mind discarding stars as well to get them into drop. Then you have the act and drop if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Sofia and its card name. You cost Soul Blast 1, call this card to rear guard circle. Save yourself a little bit of hand. It's a little bit awkward that it's a 6k, so it might not be hitting the greatest number. But once you combine the red text from Sofia as well as your Persona Ride, it's still pretty decent. At worst, it is just a free 6k booster. So it's definitely a card you'll probably see around 2 to 3 copies. I think 3 is probably like the most you'll see of it, just because it is kind of like an act and drop to call itself back out. So it's very easy to play at low copies and just see like the 1, but it is more pitch water on top of Alwidol and your other things. I just think you probably make space over this card for some other cards to draw deeper into your deck. Last star unit to talk about is Sirius Lailaps. So we have the auto when discarded from hand during your turn. You choose one of your star rear guards and it gets plus 5k power until end of turn. This is actually one of the very few grade 1s in the deck, because a lot of them you'll notice are actually grade 0, so 6k. So your early game isn't the best, at least for slamming rears. I think again, Astraeus, the grade 2, is very easy to call on turn 2, because you know it's not really going to get touched, and you can also throw something else as well. So I'm kind of thinking maybe a few copies of this guy. At most, really, you can only fit like 1 or 2. But there are a lot of better cards you can be playing over this. But maybe that plus 5k could be relevant. It's also really nice to have more 8ks as well, because you don't really have a lot of really good boosters besides like the free 6k boosters you get. So kind of nice to have an 8k booster to maybe make some more decent numbers, especially since, like, again, your booster numbers for Buddyfight are really bad besides the back row center Astraeus that we're getting. So yeah, Sirius Lailaps I think is something you're probably going to like mess around with a little bit, but you probably do value your other orders that draw you a bit more cards. But it is one of the very few grade 1s that we have that are stars that, has that AK body, and at worst you can just discard it later, or at worst you can just discard it later in the game, and that plus 5k could be pretty relevant, especially when you go first. So yeah, just an interesting card to keep in mind of. I'll talk about it more once you get to the deck building portion, but you probably won't see this in a lot of lists. If not, it'll be at very low copies. The last few cards to talk about are the orders, which we have Holy Grail right here, which is the Sentinel for the deck. You have the order ability. You can play this with cost discard a card from hand, and it is a Blitz Order Sentinel, so you can get around some very important guard restricts, very similar to Elementaria Sanctitude. You choose one of your units, and it cannot be hit until the end of battle. Then you can search your deck for up to 1 card with Great Spell or Great Fate in its card name reveal, add it to your hand, and shuffle your deck. So of course, this can add Great Spell, which kind of gives you a little bit more of a reason to play at least 2 copies. 3 is really just so you don't lose the 1 to the gauge when you do charge 2 at the beginning of the game. But yeah, you can also search Curie Spell as well, so this is definitely going to be relevant for that deck as well. Just a really amazing card. But the point is that a lot of the really good Buddyfight Sentinels, when you discard one for the cost, also search for another card from drop. This one deck thins 1, and pretty much if you already have a Great Spell set up, which is the Frozen Stars, you can just discard that for another PG cost, or just charge and draw that instead. So honestly, Holy Grail is really, really good. I really wish Sofia had an ability to play 2 Blitz orders, kind of like Davide, so you could play like this as well as Elementary Sanctitude. Honestly, this card's just so strong. It's a Blitz order Sentinel to get around guard restricts. It's also just deck thinning 1. Like, just free deck thin 1. I'll just get another PG fodder. Like, it's just crazy, crazy card. So, definitely a card you want to be playing. It really depends on your deck building ratios again, which I'll talk about more once you get to the deck list very, very soon. But yeah, Holy Grail, just an amazing, amazing card. Now, we also got some of the triggers revealed, not all of them, but a few of them. So we have Breathen Guard right here, which was actually the spell null. Here, it's actually retire. So you play this cost with Counter Blast 1. It's actually a crit trigger as well. The Blitz triggers, which are really, really cool for Buddyfight. And you basically choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. So being able to retire rear after you nullify all your opponent's abilities is crazy. Like, oh, you had resist? You don't have resist anymore. CB1 retire. Goodbye. So yeah, Breathen Guard, really crazy. There's no other retire that we know of for now for Legend World. So just an extremely strong card. You're going to be playing it because you're going to be playing some amount of crits anyways. I definitely think Sofia can get away with playing more fronts, especially if you want the deck to be more tanky, like play 4 effect fronts for damage control, 20k shields. But yeah, Breathen Guard, definitely a card you're going to be playing. It's a crit. It's also more retire in the deck when you're already nullifying all of your opponent's abilities. Then you also have Berserk Guard, which is one of the more interesting ones. That's also a critical trigger, so you have more reason to play it. You choose your rear guards, and it gets plus 2k power on a turn. Then if you have Symbel Gard in your drop, which is actually the draw 2 spell, you pay 2 gauge and add this card to your hand so you can reuse it again on another turn. I think Ultimate Buddy will be a little bit more valuable because you can give Soul Guard to Astraeus, which is really strong because if your opponent doesn't have 2 outs to like bind Astraeus twice or bounce it twice, like mentioned earlier, it just stays on the board and your opponent can't do anything about it. So yeah, I think Berserk Guard, definitely less of a reason to play it, but definitely Breathen Guard is a card you're going to be seeing 4 of. The next card to talk about is Pot of Greed. We have Symbel Gard here. Its restriction is actually a little bit less and easier than Abyss Symphony, surprisingly. So if you have Breathen Guard in your drop, and this is the CB1 retire crit, this ability can be played without paying the cost. So very easy to charge and draw your crit as well. Get that into drop by paying a gauge cost for something else, and then boom, just like that, you just play this for free. If you have 1 or more cards in your damage zone, you can play this card by paying a gauge. You draw 2 cards, so who doesn't love drawing 2 cards? Really amazing effect. It is more 0 shields on top of your other 0 shields in the deck. You definitely want to be very, very careful with how many 0 shields you have in the deck, but draw 2 can never really be bad. You just dig into your deck very faster, and the condition for playing this card is so much easier than something like Abyss Symphony, where you don't really need 3 or more damage. You just need 1 or more cards in your damage. So for some reason, they gave Legend World this really, really good treatment of just easiest condition in the world to draw 2, which is absolutely amazing. So definitely a card you're going to see seeing at a few copies. If not, you'll definitely be seeing more stars in the deck. So before I get to the deck building portion, I first want to talk about some other news. So in the Parallactic Dawn prequel manga, we actually have the return of Sophia Bell in Phantom form. So another DZ set 16 Phantom? Who knows? Like, wow, out of nowhere, this character is coming back. People were also pointing out her silhouette doesn't match out with the preview of the Phantom Fighters that we had in the very first chapter. So I wonder if she will be a villain or not, but we do have basically the summary for the next chapter. But we actually have the synopsis for the next chapter, which is that Yuta actually wants to help out the Mythics fighters besides being a Phantom fighter. So maybe we'll sell Lishkafel Phantom versus something else in the next episode, maybe against Sophia Bell. Who knows? It kind of makes Sophia Bell sound like a villain, but really, really cool that we're going to find out what Lishkafel Phantom does next week, essentially, or actually not even next week, this week, which is pretty awesome. And then, of course, we're going to be getting the full reveal on Thursday as well. So really, really excited for that. Another Phantom reveal. And also in Youthquake, we got a brand new Dark States Rideline, which is actually Phantasmic Beast Tamer Dura. So actually, Pale Moon is back. So yeah, pretty cool to get there. Of course, we have Luquier as well, but really cool to see that Youthquake is still coming out with new Vanguards. I wonder when we will get them in a main set. I think for now, it probably won't be crammed in DZ16 because there's a lot of Phantom decks as well as the Skyride stuff as well. But really good to know that we are still getting new Vanguard designs and they're like slowly getting drip marketed within the manga, which I think is really cool. So in case you didn't see that, or in case you haven't like been scrolling Twitter or whatever social media, just kind of a little bit of update to let you know on these new stuff that is getting revealed. All right, now to talk about my favorite part of the video, which is, of course, the deck building portion. Had a little bit of a help from a friend for this, but I think the ratios for stars are pretty straightforward. You kind of just max out the ratios of all the broken cards, and you pretty much just have lower ratios of everything else. The first thing you'll notice is that Astraeus is the buddy. It is really easy to find in the early game and commit him, but having that guarantee on turn 3, essentially to protect your front row, and have none of them be hit or retired is really, really good. Of course, 3 Persona Ride is the standard, and of course, we have 4 of the Dual World / Dual Nation Sophia. I'm used to calling it Dual World because of Buddyfight, but yeah, this card is amazing. You search your item, or you search Great Fate, just very, very important to see. Essentially, with Great Fate as well, Sophia, you have like 6 to 7 copies of it in your deck, so just an amazing, amazing ability, and of course, also really great at just boosting something something and turning off autos during that battle, which is very strong. We actually don't have the normal PGs yet, but I do just have 3 of the Erica PGs and then 1 Holy Grail. And so because we are playing Holy Grail, we actually have Great Fate at 3. So the reason you would play 2 copies is so if you do lose the one to gauge, you can at least still search it out. But since the Dual World Sofia only searches from deck and then either lets you put it to hand or put it into the order zone, so essentially not paying that 2 gauge cost, you do really want it in deck instead of in your hand. So I think 2 copies is probably the way to go, but we're playing 3 just so you can get that deck then 1 when you do play Holy Grail. At worst, if you do see it in your opening hand, you're easily going to charge a draw, discard it, since there is so many discard costs in this deck. Of course, since there's so many discard costs, we have 4 Alwidol as well as 3 Selene. I definitely think Selene can be at lower copies. I think optimally, really, it's at 2, which I'll talk about more once you get to some more deck building. But yeah, definitely 4 Alwidol, 4 of the other Astraeus, it's just broken card. Of course, we have 4 Breathen Guard here just because having retire while turning off abilities is really strong, because we can turn off resist of abilities of cards on the board and then just boom, just retire it, get rid of a big stack of like Ars Verena or something with really big shield on our opponent's board. For your Regulus piece of choice, I think Twin Cast is a solid option. Some other ones, of course, are going to be Fire Regulus because it's not really super easy to build a board since Vanguard doesn't have that ability. So I think Fire Regulus and Twin Cast are your premium options. I think Gradius Gradal is a really great option to outgrind your opponents. I saw a lot of players also doing that at Katana World as well. I also tried that out myself. So I also think Evergreen Transfer can be very interesting in this deck as well, since it's just a very good defensive option in your control deck. You can shut down like Dravita deck. It's very much a reactive card because you need it on the turn when your opponent does flip the OT. Or if you're fighting like Drake Vita and you really hope that they don't flip Drake Vita plus crit. But it is something to consider on top of Sound of Wave, because having more extra defense in the early game is very nice, especially when you're very much a control deck. You aren't very fast compared to a lot of the very strong icon decks right now, and a lot of the really strong fast meta decks that we have right now. So you definitely want to be able to slow down the game a whole lot. We also have 4 of the drop effect just to have more shield in the deck. I think it's something you could cut down to 3 if you want more space for the draw 2 spell. But I think for the most part, 1 bow is the way to go, just because you don't care too much about having really wide numbers, or at least doing your 5 attacks until your opponent's at 5. You're really fine with just selling for 4 because it makes Vanguard a lot easier to guard, and you'll have a pretty big column once you do hit Persona Right and have a decent amount of stars in the drop. So for that reason, we only have 1 bow. Other than that, you can always just search your set order instead with Sofia for the on place instead, if you want to use that pitch effect, or of course, do something else. But yeah, for Ultimate Buddy, just because you were playing Astraeus as the buddy, you can give him Soul Guard, which makes him so annoying to get rid of because you can't attack into him. He can't be hit by an attack, so really annoying there. We also just have 4 normal heals, but I think 2 restand heals could also be a way. I think a lot of the times you kind of just want to stick to 1, either 4 normal heals or 4 restand heals, just to make your guarding life easier. So that's the reasoning for all the ratios. The easiest cards to cut are Selene down to 2, maybe even to 1, but 2 is probably a lot more feasible. You also can cut Great Fate down to 2 as well. Again, just a little bit risky in case you gauge it, and also 1 less search target for Holy Grail. At that point, you're just playing Elementaria Sanctitude. Also really easy to cut the item as well if you don't really like it in the deck. And of course, you could also be cutting the shield or some other card to 3 as well. The drop zone shields for stars. But yeah, really great to have consistent ratios of cards. And I think also a really cool option as well is to play Sofia as the buddy. So pretty much all we've done is just swap the buddy in this list. And so having Sofia as the buddy guarantees that you get the Great Fate Frozen Stars on turn 3, but then you have to kind of like really go through your deck faster in order to hit the Astraeus on turn 3. But it's not really too hard in this deck because you have your mulligan at the beginning of the game, a lot of charge and draw every turn, and a lot of really easy draw power as well. Here's the other version of the list featuring Fire Regulus, because I think it's really hard to kind of make a board in the early game, and a worse Fire Regulus from drop once you discard it is just draw 1. And again, there's a lot of discard fodder in this deck, so having your Regulus piece have a drop effect is very strong. Pretty much what we've done here is cut Great Fate Frozen Stars to 2, as well as cut the item, which is the bow, to put in 2 Breathen Guards. I think you could also cut a 3rd Selene as well if you want more Breathen Guards, just to put it to 3. It's just you have a lot of kind of 0 shields at that point, not as many as Resile, but you still have a lot of really good pitch fodder. And of course, your normal orders can't really be played from drop, so you really want them in deck as well. But yeah, having more draw 2 power is also very solid for this deck. I also forgot to talk about the OT as well. I think Edis Foro is a really great option, but I think an interesting option as well, since you're always going to have Astraeus in the front row, is of course going to be the Buddyfight OT, because you essentially get crit to Vanguard while also getting crit to Astraeus as well. And since your Vanguard column is big enough, if you break it and put them to 5, it's going to be really hard for them to guard the Astraeus column as well, even though your numbers won't be too big unless you flip the front. But having double crit pressure with no autos, no sentinel is extremely annoying, getting a lot of cards out of your opponent's hand if you did flip the Buddyfight OT. You can also salvage a normal order from drop as well. But yeah, that pretty much concludes the deck building portion. Kind of as in conclusion, the really big thing is how many Great Fate Frozen Stars you are playing. I think 2 to 3 is the way to go. But again, you kind of want more copies in deck just to ensure there is one copy in deck to search off the Dual World Sophia, as well as be able to search off your Holy Grail as well. Just getting a deck then one, another PG pitch fodder is very nice. And of course, all your discard fodders are pretty much going to be at highest copies, your things with drop effects, your Alwidols, of course. And I think Selene is definitely the easiest card to cut on top of your item as well. All right, that wraps up the video. Next Tuesday, we actually have reveals for Demonic Lord Gabwelius Phantom. There's a new card called Resilience Dragon. Already a bad sign in my opinion that he's a grade 3. He better gain additional shield or something because, man, that deck really needs a lot of help. But hopefully it will be good stuff. And there's also new product information for October. So hopefully that will mean a new set, probably set 17, maybe something for glitters. Like, what was the last time glitters got support? Feels like forever, besides like the promo they got in JP. Who knows when we're getting that in English. And also, I feel like Lyrical has gotten very lackluster announcements. We got the Breakaway Start deck, which is really amazing, but I'm hoping that they will give product information for... But usually Lyrical is like the end of the year. For us, it's like December, January, but maybe for JP, it'll be a little bit earlier. But yeah, I don't know where the next Lyrical set is, so hopefully that will be announced in there as well. Or maybe a Stride deck set. I'll also take a Stride deck set. Stride deck set would be really cool. Try 3 or something like that would be huge. I know a lot of people, as well as myself, would be big fans of that. But yeah, those would be my guesses for that. But thank you guys so much for watching. Do stay tuned if you want to see any more support. This Thursday is also a Lishkafil Phantom if you are interested in that as well. But as usual, thank you so much for watching. Leave a like, share, subscribe, the usual, and I'll see you again in another Vanguard video.